Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something that feels like it was ripped straight from a dusty old thriller, an ancient prophecy buried for 500 years. That somehow came true. Imagine holding a fragile, yellowed parchment, its edges crumbling softly beneath your fingertips. The scent of old ink and time hanging thick in the air. The words you're reading speak of events that, centuries later, shake the world in ways you probably won't survive to see. But don't worry, you're safe for now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world we're connecting from. Now, turn off the lights, close your eyes, and pretend it's raining. Cats and dogs out there, don't worry. No umbrellas needed. Let's start tonight's journey with that rain in the background. You trudge through the damp, narrow streets of a forgotten European town. The cobblestones are slick underfoot, and somewhere nearby, a door creaks in the breeze. Your fingers clutch a small, leather-bound book, almost too fragile to hold, unearthed in a cellar beneath an old monastery. The dim flicker of your lantern casts shadows on the walls, revealing faded scribbles and cryptic symbols. This isn't just any old relic. It's a prophecy, penned half a millennium ago, hidden away from prying eyes. For centuries, it lay buried, dismissed as superstition or heresy. Yet, here you are, reading predictions that eerily mirror the world as you know it: wars, upheavals, and strange phenomena described with unsettling clarity. Historians still argue whether the prophecy was truly written in the 16th century or later forged by secret societies keen on manipulating belief. The debate is fierce because some details are too specific, too accurate, while others remain vague or symbol-laden, begging interpretation. The sense of wonder is almost overwhelming. You can almost feel the weight of the past pressing down, like the cold stone walls around you. The crackle of the lantern and distant thunder become a backdrop to the silent words on the page, urging you to piece together the puzzle left by someone long gone. But why was this prophecy hidden away? What powers feared its message? And how did it survive when so many other secrets were lost to time? These questions gnaw at you as the rain patters louder, almost like a countdown. You flip to the first line, and the story begins not with a bang, but a whisper, a promise of revelations that stretch across centuries. But she never opened that letter, at least. Not then. You find yourself drawn deeper into the origins of this mysterious prophecy, because every ancient tale has a beginning. And this one's buried in the swirling mists of history, just waiting for you to uncover it. Imagine the year is around 1520, a time when Europe is on the cusp of seismic changes. The Renaissance blooms in art and science, but the shadows of religious wars and political upheaval creep across the continent. It's a world rich in contradictions, where faith and fear mingle in equal measure. The prophecy itself was said to have emerged from a small, cloistered monastery tucked into the remote highlands of what is now Central Europe, somewhere between the misty valleys and jagged mountain peaks. Picture monks with ink-stained fingers, their faces lined with years of contemplation, scribbling cryptic verses in Latin on fragile parchment by candlelight. The room smells faintly of old wood and burning tallow, mingled with the sharp tang of iron from the quills they dip into inkwells. This origin story isn't just a neat little backdrop. It's crucial because it anchors the prophecy in a very specific time and place, giving it a sense of authenticity that scholars both cherish and question. You might expect monks to be the keepers of knowledge, but also the censors of dangerous ideas. It's believed the prophecy was penned by one such monk, whose name is lost to time, but who some whisper was no ordinary scribe. Some say he was a former alchemist. Others claim he had visions, or perhaps he was simply a gifted storyteller who encoded warnings in verse. Historians still argue whether this prophecy was an attempt to foresee the future or a coded critique of the political powers of the day. The Renaissance was a period bursting with new ideas, but also fraught with tension between the church and emerging secular rulers. The prophecy's language is thick with symbolism, blending religious allegory with hints of natural disasters and social upheaval. For example, references to fiery skies and waters rising to swallow kingdoms could mean volcanic eruptions or floods, but could also symbolize wars or revolutions. You run your fingers over a page describing a kingdom shattered by betrayal, not by sword, and can't help but wonder what event from 500 years ago inspired such a phrase. Was it the fall of a noble house, a religious schism, or something even more secret? These questions make the prophecy feel alive, a breathing document that defies simple explanation. Quirkier tidbits emerge from the margins of the manuscript, tiny sketches of strange beasts, cryptic numerical codes, and odd celestial charts that don't quite match known star maps. Some fringe researchers have speculated that these elements hint at lost knowledge or contact with otherworldly intelligence, though mainstream historians remain skeptical, preferring explanations rooted in the cultural context of the era. What's undeniably fascinating is how this prophecy reflects the fears and hopes of a society grappling with immense change. It's a mirror to the human condition, anxiety about the future, the desire to control the uncontrollable, and the need to make sense of chaos through narrative. You almost feel the cold chill of those monks' candlelit rooms as you imagine them wrestling with the same existential dread. The document's physicality itself tells a story. The parchment is uneven, stitched together from scraps, suggesting it was compiled over time. The ink varies in shade and thickness, evidence that multiple hands may have contributed, or that the same author returned to it repeatedly. This adds layers to the mystery. Was it a living document, edited to adapt to unfolding events? Or was it deliberately made confusing to hide its true meaning? As you imagine the prophecy's humble beginnings, you're pulled into a swirl of questions and possibilities. Was the prophecy a genuine attempt at divination, a political tool, or an elaborate piece of art meant to inspire and warn in equal measure? The answers seem as elusive as the fog drifting through those ancient mountain valleys. And just as you start to feel you might grasp the whole picture, a faint scratching noise behind you makes you jump. Perhaps the prophecy wasn't meant to be found so easily after all. You keep turning the fragile pages, eager to meet the shadowy figure behind this tangled prophecy, the enigmatic author whose name history swallowed whole. The thing is, in tales like this, the mystery of the creator often carries as much weight as the words themselves. So, Who was this person? Scribbling warnings and visions that would echo half a millennium later. It's not a straightforward answer. Instead, you step into a foggy realm where fact, legend, and rumor twist together like ivy around ancient stone. The most commonly accepted theory points to a monk named Brother Anselm, a recluse by all accounts. Anselm was said to live on the monastery's outskirts, rarely seen in the bustling halls. His colleagues whispered about his unusual interests, alchemy, astronomy, and arcane manuscripts from far-off lands. You can almost picture him sitting in a cold, dim cell. The faint scent of ink and old parchment swirling as he meticulously scribbles his cryptic verses. His eyes, rumored to be sharp and piercing, reflected a mind wrestling with ideas too vast for his time. But here's the catch. No direct proof ties Anselm conclusively to the prophecy. His name appears in monastery records, but never explicitly linked to these writings. Some speculate that Anselm may have been a pen name, or even a collective pseudonym used by several monks who contributed to the document over time. After all, medieval scribes often remained anonymous, fearing persecution or misunderstanding if their ideas challenged the powerful. Historians still argue whether this anonymity was a protective cloak or an intentional way to give the prophecy a timeless, universal voice. The lack of a single identifiable author adds to the prophecy's mystique, leaving you wondering if the true writer was a visionary, a conspirator, or perhaps someone caught between both worlds. What adds another layer of intrigue is the mix of personal notes found in the margins scrawled in hurry, sometimes desperate handwriting. These notes hint at a troubled mind, filled with fear and urgency. Phrases like, "Time is running out," and "the darkness approaches" suggest that the author was not merely forecasting, but warning. This emotional edge breaks the cold, academic veneer, making the prophecy feel alive, urgent, almost haunted. Some fringe scholars have taken this further, proposing that the author had prophetic visions triggered by near-death experiences or mystical rituals. They point to odd symbols resembling ancient sigils scattered through the text images some say were meant to protect or summon unseen forces, while mainstream historians roll their eyes at these claims. It's hard not to feel a chill imagining a solitary figure tapping into realms beyond the ordinary. There's also speculation about the author's possible ties to secret orders like the Rosicrucians or early Freemasons groups known for guarding hidden knowledge. These connections feed into conspiracy theories about why the prophecy was suppressed for centuries and who might have wanted it buried. Yet despite all these theories, the truth remains frustratingly elusive. The author's identity is like a shadow flickering just beyond your vision, leaving you with tantalizing hints but no solid answers. It's as if the very act of writing the prophecy was meant to be a puzzle in itself, crafted to protect its secrets through obscurity. You feel a strange kinship with this unknown scribe, someone who, centuries ago, poured thoughts onto fragile parchment, uncertain whether anyone would ever read them. The loneliness of that act lingers, a silent echo in the cold monastery walls. And just when you think you've grasped the outline of this shadowy figure, a sudden gust from the open cellar door chills you to the bone, as if the past itself is breathing down your neck. What truths lie hidden behind those blurred edges? Only the next pages will tell. Word count 10 Noreen. 89. I will add a little more to reach 1100 plus words. Before closing the page, you notice a peculiar symbol at the bottom corner, a circle enclosing a triangle, and across something that doesn't appear elsewhere in the manuscript. It feels like a signature, a mark left deliberately, yet its meaning slips just out of reach. Scholars debate if it represents a secret society, a mystical belief, or simply the author's personal emblem. Whatever it is, it adds one more thread to the web of mystery you're now tangled in. You realize this story isn't just about an old prediction. It's about the human desire to glimpse the future, to leave a message behind when the present feels uncertain. And in that longing, the author and you are strangely connected across centuries, sharing a fragile hope that what's hidden will one day be understood. You keep flipping through the time-worn pages, and now you reach the early interpretations of the prophecy how monks, nobles, and common folk first grappled with these mysterious verses. It's a fascinating maze, because this wasn't just a straightforward prediction handed down neatly. It was a text that provoked confusion, fear, and fierce debate from the start. Imagine yourself back in the mid-1500s, where literacy was rare and knowledge carefully guarded. The prophecy wasn't widely circulated, but word of it trickled through monastery corridors and nearby villages, whispered with a mix of awe and dread. Some monks read it as a divine warning, a call to repentance and spiritual vigilance. They interpreted the fiery skies as God's anger, the waters rising as the flood of sin, threatening to drown the faithful. Their sermons wove the prophecy into warnings against heresy and moral decay. But among the nobility and emerging political powers, the prophecy stirred a different kind of anxiety. Some saw it as a veiled critique of rulers and institutions, a coded threat suggesting upheaval was imminent. In royal courts, advisors debated its meaning in hushed tones, worried about the implications for fragile alliances and succession disputes. The possibility that it hinted at specific betrayals or collapses was enough to make some rulers uneasy. And you can almost hear the scratch of quills as orders to suppress or discredit the text were issued. Historians still argue whether these early interpretations were more about the actual words or the fears projected onto them by listeners. The prophecy's language is vague and metaphorical enough that everyone could and did read their own anxieties into it. This ambiguity is one reason it remained both powerful and elusive for centuries. What's remarkable, and a little eerie, is that early on, some individuals took the prophecy literally. There are records of people making preparations for disasters predicted in the text, hoarding food, seeking refuge, or embarking on pilgrimages. One story tells of a farmer in a small village who, convinced the prophecy foretold a flood, moved his family to higher ground just weeks before. A sudden storm washed away much of the farmland. Whether coincidence or fate, these personal acts of faith add an emotional texture to the prophecy's history. On the quirky side, you'll find that some of the earliest commentaries were written in code themselves. Monks used ciphered notes, perhaps to protect themselves from persecution or to obscure dangerous knowledge. These ciphers have puzzled cryptologists for decades, with some suggesting they contain hidden layers of meaning, maybe even instructions or warnings that remain undiscovered. Also, the prophecy's style mixes classical Latin with slang and regional dialects, which makes translating it a nightmare. Translators sometimes disagreed on basic words, leading to wildly different versions that only fueled confusion. One phrase, translated as, "the serpent's breath will poison the land," has been variously interpreted as a disease outbreak, an invasion, or even a metaphor for corrupt leadership. This linguistic fluidity made the prophecy a kind of Rorschach test for each era's hopes and fears. You can almost sense the frustration of early scholars wrestling with these puzzles, their quills scratching against parchment as they tried to decode what might be a divine message or a political trap. And as with all great mysteries, the prophecy was often met with suspicion. Some clergy branded it heretical. Others dismissed it as superstition. This tension kept the document oscillating between reverence and rejection. Amid these debates, a palpable emotional undercurrent runs through the story. People weren't just reading words. They were searching for meaning in uncertain times, grasping for control in a world tilting toward chaos. The loneliness of facing an unpredictable future, paired with the hope that someone, somewhere, might understand the signs, makes the prophecy feel like a shared human experience stretching across centuries. At the same time, you get flashes of the everyday life around the prophecy, the crackle of fires and hearths, the smell of wet earth after rain, the murmurs of villagers trading tales in the market square. It's a vivid backdrop to a text that somehow manages to be both timeless and deeply rooted in its era. And just as you begin to feel you've unraveled the essence of these early readings, you stumble upon references to efforts to suppress the prophecy, whispers of secret meetings, destroyed copies, and threats to silence anyone who dared speak of it hint at a shadow war beneath the surface. It's as if the prophecy itself was a living thing dangerous enough to be buried, yet persistent enough to haunt those who tried to forget. That tension sets the stage for the political intrigue that swallowed the prophecy whole in the years to come, because sometimes a message is more frightening than any sword. You now enter the shadowy corridors of power, where the prophecy didn't just unsettle monks and peasants, but ignited fires in royal courts and political strongholds. The story here is thick with whispers, secrets, and deliberate erasures, a reminder that words can be just as dangerous as swords when they threaten the status quo. Imagine grand halls lined with tapestries depicting victorious kings, the scent of beeswax candles heavy in the air, and courtiers exchanging cautious glances as they discuss rumors of a prophecy that could topple thrones. During the turbulent 16th and 17th centuries, Europe was a chessboard of fragile alliances, religious wars, and power struggles. Monarchs feared uprisings and invasions, and an obscure prophecy predicting upheaval was the last thing they wanted circulating. You can almost hear the hushed meetings where advisors debated whether to publicly denounce the text or simply erase it from existence. Some leaders ordered entire libraries purged, while others employed spies to track down and silence those who dared spread the prophecy's message. Historians still argue whether this political suppression was driven mainly by fear of rebellion or by more practical concerns, such as maintaining church authority or safeguarding fragile treaties. The truth is probably a tangled mix of both. The prophecy threatened to inspire unrest by predicting kingdoms broken not by sword, but by shadow. A phrase vague enough to be interpreted as sedition. This censorship campaign was ruthless. Copies of the prophecy were confiscated, burned, or hidden away. Monks who copied or discussed it faced harsh punishments, ranging from imprisonment to exile. You might picture a monk, heart pounding, slipping a precious parchment beneath his robe as guards march past. These secret acts of preservation were fraught with danger, but fueled by a fierce belief that the prophecy's message was too important to lose. One particularly gripping story involves a noblewoman who secretly preserved a copy by sewing it into the lining of her gown. She risked everything to protect what many called heresy. And centuries later, her descendants would stumble upon the hidden text, reigniting the prophecy's legacy. This thread of human courage amidst repression adds a poignant emotional layer, reminding you that behind every historic event are individual lives trembling with hope and fear. Oddly enough, the political suppression only fueled rumors and conspiracy theories. Secret societies, both real and imagined, were said to guard the prophecy's secrets, passing them down in coded messages. Some believed that a cabal of powerful figures used the prophecy as a tool, sometimes to frighten rivals, sometimes to manipulate public opinion. This murky web of intrigue fed public fascination, even as official records attempted to erase all trace. The physical effects of this suppression are visible in the manuscript itself. You notice smudges where pages were torn or burned, annotations scratched out, and a patchwork of repairs. It feels like a battlefield frozen in time, words caught between erasure and survival. The parchment carries scars, much like the history it records. A particularly eerie detail appears in marginal notes, a warning that the prophecy must sleep until the time of reckoning. This phrase is repeated with variations, suggesting that whoever controlled the text believed it should remain hidden, possibly to prevent panic or to protect certain interests. The notion that the prophecy was deliberately buried like a sleeping beast adds a haunting suspense, as if its awakening would unleash forces beyond control. At the same time, you sense the melancholy of loss, the countless versions and commentaries destroyed, the knowledge lost to fear. It's a reminder of how fragile cultural memory can be when caught in the crossfire of politics. You imagine the quiet despair of those who believed in the prophecy's truth, but had to watch it vanish beneath the heavy hand of censorship. There's also a sensory richness here. Imagine the oppressive atmosphere of royal chambers, thick with incense meant to mask anxiety, or the cold stone dungeons where forbidden texts were tossed like worthless scraps. The sounds of rustling papers, hurried footsteps, and whispered prayers create an immersive backdrop for the high stakes involved. As this chapter of the prophecy's life ends, you realize that the political intrigue didn't just bury the text physically, it created a veil of silence that would last centuries, setting the stage for its long disappearance. Yet, like a faint heartbeat beneath rubble, the prophecy's pulse never fully stopped. And just as you begin to feel the weight of that silence, a sudden echo from the past calls out a forgotten manuscript, buried and waiting to be found, will soon change everything. You find yourself tracing the dusty path that leads to the prophecy's long disappearance, an almost total vanishing from the historical record that lasted for centuries. It's the kind of disappearance that fuels every treasure hunter's dreams and scholar's frustrations, a manuscript so powerful it had to be buried, yet so elusive it almost slipped beyond memory entirely. Picture a dark, crumbling monastery library during the late 17th century. Shelves sag under the weight of forgotten tomes. The air thick with the smell of mold and aging leather. A sudden fire, or perhaps a deliberate purge, reduces many volumes to ashes, including numerous copies of the prophecy. Some say it was a tragic accident. Others claim it was a coordinated effort to silence the warning forever. Historians still argue whether this event was an unfortunate disaster or part of a broader, more sinister effort. What's certain is that after this period, references to the prophecy become nearly non-existent in official records. It's as if it vanished from the collective consciousness, surviving only in whispered legends and fragmented notes. The psychological effect of this disappearance on those aware of the prophecy is palpable. Some religious communities believed the world had been spared a catastrophe by burying these dangerous predictions. Others feared the silence signaled that the prophecy's fulfillment was imminent, and that its hiding only delayed an unavoidable reckoning. You can almost feel the tension in the air as people tiptoe around the topic, afraid to speak it aloud. The silence itself becomes a kind of message, heavy with meaning. In a way, the disappearance becomes a second prophecy, one forecasting a world reluctant to face uncomfortable truths. Yet, despite the near erasure, the prophecy's essence survives in unexpected ways. Oral traditions in certain remote villages keep fragments alive, passed down through generations as cautionary tales. These stories often mutate, blending local folklore with elements of the original prophecy, showing how narratives evolve when written records fail. One quirky and fascinating detail is the discovery of a 19th century folk song in a rural region, whose lyrics mirror lines from the original prophecy. This song, passed down by memory, includes obscure references to the silent warning and the shadow that sleeps beneath the earth. Scholars who study this song debate whether it was consciously linked to the prophecy or if it emerged independently, yet parallels the ancient text eerily. The sensory experience of this period of disappearance is stark. You imagine the cold, damp cellars where manuscripts might have been hidden, the rustle of cloth as parchments were wrapped and buried, the faint odor of earth and decay mixing with ink fading away. The loss is almost tangible, like the last breath of a forgotten dream. This silence and loss create a profound loneliness around the prophecy. It becomes a ghost story, whispered by a dwindling few who feel the weight of a message too heavy to bear, yet too important to ignore. You sense their quiet desperation, clutching remnants in the dark while the rest of the world turns away. At the same time, this near erasure plants a seed of hope and suspense. If the prophecy could survive hidden for centuries, what might happen when it finally resurfaces? What truths will it reveal? The anticipation is electric. And then, you reach the pivotal moment, the prophecy's rediscovery in the early 20th century, a moment that shattered silence and reignited debate. But before that, you pause, feeling the deep stillness of those lost years. the calm before a storm that would change everything. You now stand at the moment of rediscovery, the early 20th century, when the prophecy suddenly re-emerged from obscurity like a ghost stepping out of the shadows. Picture a chilly autumn afternoon in 1912 with amber leaves swirling down narrow cobblestone streets as a young scholar named Elias Grayson carefully pries open a forgotten chest in the basement of a dilapidated English estate. Dust motes dance in the weak sunlight filtering through a grimy window, and the faint scent of mildew and aged parchment rises as he lifts out a bundle of brittle manuscripts. Elias is a man obsessed with unraveling forgotten histories, a collector of the strange and arcane. His discovery isn't a neatly packaged artifact, but rather a disordered collection of parchments, some singed at the edges, others scribbled over in multiple hands. Among these fragile documents lies the long-lost prophecy, its pages bearing the mysterious symbols and cryptic verses that had vanished from public knowledge for centuries. This rediscovery sends ripples through academic circles, sparking immediate excitement and fierce controversy. Historians debate the authenticity of the find. Some argue it's a forgery or a cleverly constructed hoax, while others see it as the real deal, a priceless link to a shadowy past. The arguments stretch over years, with experts dissecting every phrase, every symbol. The excitement around Elias's find is palpable, but it's not just scholarly curiosity at play. The early 20th century was a time of global upheaval, world wars, rapid technological change, and political revolutions. The prophecy's eerie predictions about a great fire consuming the old world resonate deeply with a society standing on the brink of unprecedented turmoil. This historical context gives the prophecy renewed power and urgency. A quirky aspect of the rediscovery is Elias's eccentric personality. He reportedly kept a pet raven named Nostradamus, who was said to call loudly whenever Elias reached particularly ominous passages. Whether coincidence or superstition, this little detail adds a touch of folklore to the story and reflects the almost mystical aura surrounding the prophecy. Sensory details come alive in Elias's description of handling the manuscripts. He writes of the delicate texture of the parchment, the faint smell of smoke and earth, and the way the ink sometimes seems to shimmer under moonlight, a subtle reminder of how deeply intertwined the physicality of these objects is with their mysterious content. The scholarly debate continues, focusing on the prophecy's cryptic references to events that had yet to occur: wars, technological revolutions, even shifts in global power. Some historians argue that the vague and symbolic language allows for broad interpretation, making it easy to fit any major event to the prophecy's words after the fact. Others insist that specific predictions are too detailed and accurate to be mere coincidence. At the heart of these discussions is a larger question about prophecy itself. Is it a genuine glimpse into the future? A self-fulfilling mechanism driven by collective belief? Or a poetic reflection of perennial human fears and hopes? Scholars still argue whether the prophecy should be read literally or metaphorically, and whether its true value lies in prediction or in its cultural resonance. As you ponder Elias's discovery, you can't help but feel the tension between hope and dread that such prophecies evoke. The idea that a text written centuries ago could speak to modern anxieties is both fascinating and unsettling. And just as the academic world grapples with these questions, rumors begin to swirl about shadowy figures seeking to acquire or suppress the manuscripts. Some whisper of secret auctions and mysterious disappearances, as if the prophecy still carries a dangerous power that certain groups wish to control or bury once again. You close this chapter feeling the prophecy's pulse quicken, its story far from over. The manuscripts are no longer hidden, but their full impact has yet to unfold. What new truths will they reveal? And who will be brave enough to listen? You're now in the thick of it, the decoded chaos that emerges once Elias Grayson and a cadre of obsessed scholars begin dissecting the rediscovered prophecy line by line. What begins as curiosity quickly warps into obsession. The manuscript is no longer just historical curiosity. It becomes a puzzle box. One people are convinced can foretell the future or explain the past with surgical precision. And like any good obsession, it consumes its followers whole. You sit hunched over a desk, lit by flickering candlelight, just like they did with magnifying glass in one hand and a cup of oversteeped tea in the other. The pages of the prophecy crackle as you turn them. Centuries-old ink curling at the edges of each cryptic stanza. The room smells of paper, wax, and the faint tang of desperation. Because once you start trying to understand this thing, you don't really stop. The prophecy is written in a layered style. Some passages are clearly metaphorical, while others are frighteningly specific. One line speaks of towers pierced by iron birds and the sky weeping fire. When this is re-examined in the wake of the September 11th attacks, nearly a century after the manuscript's rediscovery, people lose their minds. The internet swells with theories, forum posts, video essays, and yet, historians still argue whether such a passage was ever meant to refer to a literal event or whether we see patterns because we want to. That's the hook of it. The prophecy becomes a Rorschach test, revealing more about the reader than the writer. Some interpret it as a political warning, others as spiritual guidance. A few more fringe voices claim it's extraterrestrial in origin, or part of a lost Atlantean codex. You roll your eyes, but you keep reading, because every so often, the prophecy says something that hits too close to home to ignore. You feel this deep emotional tug, especially in the passages that describe the long sleep of memory and the day the old songs fall silent. There's a kind of aching beauty in the words, like someone saw far ahead, not just into events, but into human sorrow. And then, as now, that sorrow feels familiar. Scholars who study the manuscript develop what they call decoding fatigue, a kind of mental exhaustion from the constant attempt to extract meaning from ambiguity. Elias himself started to fall into paranoia. He claimed that every time he deciphered a stanza, something strange would happen. A friend would fall ill, or he'd find strange symbols carved into his study wall. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe it's the prophecy pushing back. There's one mainstream historical fact that gets revisited in these discussions: the Great Fire of London in 1666. One verse seems to reference it almost word for word. From the golden crown shall rise a tongue of flame, and the city shall bathe in heat that cleanses pride. Some academics argue it's too accurate to be coincidence. Others claim it's retrofitting history to myth. Still, the prediction sparks new fascination with fire symbolism throughout the manuscript. Another oddly specific detail appears in a lesser-known section. It mentions numbers carved in light across the sky, which some interpret as a foretelling of satellites or digital communication. One fringe theorist even suggests the prophecy predicted the creation of the internet. Again, maybe that's reaching, or maybe you just haven't decoded it all yet. Emotion runs high in this era of the prophecy's second life. You picture university debates that go on until 3 a.m., red string boards crowding the walls of offices, late-night emails filled with urgency and existential dread. There's this unshakable sense that the prophecy is unfinished business, not just an ancient text, but a call to action or a warning we're failing to heed. By the 1930s, interpretations start to splinter into factions. Some groups believe the prophecy is apocalyptic and begin publishing pamphlets with dire predictions. Others claim it's a call for spiritual awakening. A few even suggest that decoding the final stanza will unlock some kind of hidden knowledge, what they vaguely refer to as the key to the second dawn. What that means exactly, nobody knows. Or if they do, they're not telling, and then it gets weirder. In 1941, a German intelligence officer reportedly comes into possession of a translated copy of the prophecy. A few surviving letters suggest the Nazis tried to use it to guide their military strategy, believing it revealed timing and patterns in the collapse of empires. There's even an unverified claim that Himmler became obsessed with a passage about the eagle who dies in winter under the gaze of the bear. He believed it was about the Eastern Front. He was wrong. But it didn't stop the obsession. This brush with power adds another layer of mystery and danger to the manuscript. Was the prophecy just a passive relic? Or did it shape decisions, alter events, drive people toward ruin if it's capable of steering history? Then maybe it's not just a book. Maybe it's a weapon. That thought lingers as the decoding efforts continue. Scholars in the Cold War era use computers to analyze the language patterns, hoping to discover encryption or predictive algorithms. In the 1980s, one team at Oxford believed they found a mathematical sequence embedded in the rhythm of the stanzas like a Fibonacci spiral coded into poetry. It turned out to be a coincidence, or at least that's the official story. And just when you think the mystery has reached its peak, you learn about the missing page. A final stanza is referenced in Elias Grayson's early notes, but no known copy includes it. It's said to describe the return of the silence and the awakening beneath ash. No one's sure what that means, but the fact that the stanza is missing sends people spiraling into a frenzy. Where did it go? Who took it? What was so terrifying that it had to be cut out? Now you sit there, rereading everything, looking for the pattern, feeling the chill creep down your spine. Because whether or not you believe in fate or prophecy, one thing is certain: the text sees something. And maybe, just maybe, it's seeing you. You're still holding the prophecy, pages spread out like a deck of very bad tarot cards. But now, things are different. There's a tension building not just in your spine or the whispery, candlelit corners of your imagination, but out there in the real world. Something about the prophecy begins to leak. At first, it's subtle. A fringe academic at a conference in Prague mentions the prophecy during a Q&A, expecting to be met with laughter. Instead, 3 people in the audience nod solemnly, as if they know exactly what he's talking about. One of them slips him a note afterward. It contains a line from the prophecy one not yet translated, not yet public. The children of clay will crumble in the breath of glass. Creepy. Very. Coincidence? Possibly. But probably not. The 1990s bring the prophecy into an entirely new realm, the internet. You remember how the early web felt like a digital Wild West? Buzzing chat rooms, glowing green forums, grainy GIFs. It's here, in the weirdest corners of cyberspace, that the prophecy mutates into something viral. An old chai.txt file surfaces in 1997 on a conspiracy site called OracleNet. It contains 37 lines from the manuscript, poorly formatted but word for word accurate. No one ever claims authorship. The admin of the forum swears he doesn't know who posted it. Then he deletes his account and disappears. What follows is a strange kind of digital resurrection. Reddit threads explode. Conspiracy YouTubers latch on like hungry wolves. Some say the prophecy predicted Chernobyl. Others link it to the fall of the Berlin Wall. One particularly passionate user insists it reveals the exact date the moon landing was faked by omission. He claims, whatever that means. But beneath all the noise, a few serious researchers quietly notice something uncanny. The prophecy's predictions seem to shift subtly depending on who reads them. Not literally. It's not like the words rearrange themselves, but people interpret lines in radically different ways, often aligned with their personal fears, beliefs, or current events. A Catholic theologian sees apocalyptic judgment. A climate scientist sees global warming. A digital anthropologist sees an early warning about the fragility of civilization. The same lines, different meanings. This is where the scholarly community splits for good. One side insists the prophecy is metaphorical, a masterpiece of psychological projection. They say its true power lies in how it reflects us back at ourselves, our paranoia, our need for meaning. The other side is not so sure. They argue the prophecy contains coded predictions, too many to ignore, too consistent to be chance. A few whisper that perhaps it was written by someone or something with access to knowledge beyond time. Now, here's where things go from weird to full-on goosebumps. In 2002, a previously unknown page of the prophecy is found inside the cover of a 16th century atlas in a monastery in northern Italy. It's discovered by accident seriously. The librarian was trying to shake out a spider. The page is in the same ink, the same meter, the same spidery Latin script. It refers to the sleeping wave beneath the glass-eyed city, which some interpret as a reference to the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, or the threat of a future one. It also mentions something chilling. The one who translates me shall awaken what sleeps beneath. Naturally, this line is hotly debated. Historians still argue whether this page was part of the original manuscript or a later forgery added to stir fear. Handwriting analysis seems to match the original. But of course, skeptics claim that's too convenient. Some say the prophecy is beginning to predict its own rediscovery as though it knows it's being read. Around this time, there's a growing movement, half scholarly, half cult-like, called the Circle of the Second Dawn. You'll see their sigil pop up in strange places, etched into the sand on a remote beach, stenciled on abandoned subway walls. even hidden in the code of a viral marketing campaign for an energy drink? No. Really, they claim to have found the final passage, the missing stanza Elias Grayson noted long ago. What's even more unsettling, they won't share it. They say revealing it too soon would accelerate the collapse. Some call it nonsense. Others say it's a kind of ethical restraint. But the secrecy only fuels speculation. What's in that last verse? A date, a name, a location, a password. Meanwhile, pop culture gets wind of the prophecy. You spot it in strange places, a line muttered in a movie, graffiti on a band's album art, whispered during a creepy podcast ad break. One best-selling thriller features a killer who leaves verses at each crime scene. Suddenly, the prophecy isn't just a curiosity, it's myth. Media. Mean. But here's the twist. All this attention has consequences. You begin to hear stories. People obsessed with decoding the prophecy start to vanish. Not many, just enough to make headlines. A graduate student in Munich disappears after claiming she'd cracked the pattern behind the manuscript's calendar references. A retired linguist in Argentina is found in his study. Manuscripts scattered around. Walls covered in red marker notes. Cause of death undetermined. Quirky detail, sure. Creepy as all hell? Definitely. You try to brush it off. Coincidences. But then, one quiet evening, you find yourself reading a stanza aloud. Just a whisper. You're alone. The light flickers. The air shifts. You feel watched. The prophecy's grip is not just historical now. It's present, alive, breathing through the cracks of every discussion, every Reddit post, every second guess you make while reading it. You begin to ask yourself a terrible question. What if the prophecy doesn't just predict? What if it listens? And still, the final stanza remains hidden, or protected, or waiting. Now you're in deep. The prophecy isn't just a dusty manuscript anymore. It's a presence, a hum beneath your skin, a whisper you think you hear right as you fall asleep, even though nothing's there, or at least nothing you're willing to acknowledge. You wonder if Elias Grayson felt this too. That heavy, unshakable feeling that maybe the prophecy is not just meant to be read, but that it's also reading you. You aren't alone in this. All over the world, people are becoming increasingly fixated, especially on the missing stanza, the so-called final passage, and the circle of the second dawn, who claim to possess it, are going quiet. Their website goes dark. Their encrypted forms disappear. Members begin posting cryptic farewell messages like, "The dreamer is stirring, and we've said enough. The silence must hold." Nobody really knows what to do with that. Now, every verse of the prophecy is under scrutiny again. Modern linguistic algorithms are fed the text to search for embedded codes. Some researchers believe they find coordinates hidden in the rhythm, longitude, and latitude points that seem to fall across historical disaster sites: Pompeii, Chernobyl, Hiroshima, New Orleans. Too coincidental to ignore, too vague to act on. Still, it gets inside your head. You begin to see the prophecy everywhere, whether it's there or not. The prophecy becomes the Rorschach test of the century. Anxious climate scientists point to lines like, "The blue deserts will swallow the cities of light. They say it's about sea level rise and climate collapse. Religious groups think it's a divine reckoning. Tech theorists, they claim it's AI gone rogue, citing this eerie verse. The child of numbers will forget the hands that shaped it. And here's the thing. This line was written 5 centuries ago, long before electricity, before binary, before any semblance of machines. It reads like it was written for today. For now, that's the part that makes your breath catch in your throat. Emotionally, this all starts to weigh on people. There's a psychological phenomenon, prophetic anxiety, a kind of low-grade existential dread that comes from trying to decode something that feels like it knows more than you do. Some people lose sleep. Some become obsessed. A few check themselves into clinics, convinced the prophecy is watching them. One man in Canada stops speaking entirely and writes only in fragmented Latin. Authorities find a printed copy of the prophecy under his mattress, stained with tea and tears. Meanwhile, an underground community begins to form a loose collective of ex-believers, ex-researchers, and disillusioned prophecy enthusiasts who call themselves the blank verse. Their whole thing is letting go. They gather online to burn digital copies of the manuscript, to delete old discussion threads, to try and move on. But even they can't help but ask questions. Like, if the final stanza is so dangerous, what exactly does it say? That's when the leaks begin. First, it's a file, anonymous, watermarked, grainy as a fax. It claims to contain the final passage, transcribed by someone inside the circle before they vanished. The verse is cryptic and simple. In silence, the echo will shatter. The mouthless shall speak the name. Ash will forget it was fire, and time will eat its own frame. 4 lines, that's all. But the internet melts down anyway. Forums explode with interpretations. Is this the end? A metaphor, a bluff. Historians still argue whether this is the real final stanza or an invention meant to throw people off. Some say it doesn't match the original cadence. Others swear it fits too perfectly. Debate rages. And once again, the prophecy swells into something mythic. The kind of myth that shapes behavior, that changes the way people live. A tech startup halts its AI project, citing unease around timing and ethical implications. A global spiritualist movement begins using the phrase, "mouthless shall speak in its meditations." Governments, well, they stay officially silent. But an email leaked in 2017 from a Scandinavian intelligence analyst contains the phrase, "We cannot treat this merely as literature anymore." Amid this chaos, something else surfaces. A physical object, a stone tablet, unearthed during construction in Istanbul, inscribed with a symbol identical to the crest found on the prophecy's final page. It's dated to the 1400s, the same decade the prophecy was believed to have been written. How did that symbol travel from Western Europe to the Ottoman Empire? And why is it buried beneath a modern-day airport? Questions with no answers, but plenty of implications. And then there's the smell. You're probably thinking, what does smell have to do with prophecy? Well, here's the thing. A group of researchers analyzing the ink and parchment of the manuscript report an odd, recurring scent, something like singed rosemary and iron. They can't trace the source. It's not from the parchment. not the ink, not the storage. It's just there, some kind of olfactory echo, an emotional trigger baked into the pages. Smell is memory, after all. And this memory smells like something ancient is trying to burn its way back into the present. Meanwhile, pop culture goes further down the rabbit hole. A blockbuster movie is greenlit, loosely inspired by the prophecy. It's called Ash Eater, and the final shot is of a child reciting the mysterious stanza in a desert of glass. People leave the theater shaken. A best-selling horror novel lifts entire lines from the manuscript, and a new pop song samples an AI voice reading one of the verses. You can't escape it now. The prophecy isn't hidden anymore. It's background noise. And that noise grows all across the world. People start reporting the same dream, a vast library on fire, with pages floating in slow motion, a voice reciting the prophecy in a language no one speaks, the clock ticking backwards. You have it too, once, just once, but it lingers. Emotionally, it's like grief for something that hasn't happened yet. One final twist: a team of astronomers at an observatory in Chile picks up an unusual radio signal in early 2023. Just a rhythmic pulse, 4 beats, then silence. When translated into binary and fed through a language model, it spits out a single line. Ash will forget it was fire. You can't make this stuff up. Or maybe someone did. That's the problem with prophecy. The more you learn, the less you understand. But now there's no going back. The manuscript is no longer just history. It's momentum. And it's about to hit something big. You wake up one morning and realize something strange. The prophecy has stopped being about the prophecy. It's not just an ancient manuscript anymore, or a riddle to be decoded. It's become part of the air, the cultural soup, the shared dream. It's in memes and pop songs, whispered in lectures, argued over at late-night cafes, and pinned on corkboards by detectives who absolutely should have retired by now. But behind all the buzz, there's a quieter, more unnerving shift. People are beginning to act differently. You notice it first in small, almost imperceptible ways. A man at a bus stop stands perfectly still for several minutes, eyes closed, muttering the same line under his breath. Time will eat its own frame. A librarian refuses to check out a certain book because it contains the phrase, breath of glass. A woman in Nebraska builds a replica of a medieval scriptorium in her garage and won't explain why. It's as though the prophecy isn't content with being read. It wants to be lived. The circle of the second dawn hasn't resurfaced, but whispers of ritual preparation and the date of alignment begin to spread on dark forums. A digital manifesto attributed to them floats briefly through Telegram before vanishing. One line haunts you. When the final passage is spoken aloud, the threshold begins to thin. Of course, scholars are divided. Again, historians still argue whether these behaviors are mass hysteria, complex psychological projection, or the slow burn of something more profound. A team from Cambridge insists this is a case of mimetic contamination, the idea that information can behave like a virus, infecting thought patterns and behaviors. They call it prophetic contagion, but you're not sure. especially when the anomalies start. In a lab in Iceland, a linguist studying phonetic structures of the prophecy begins speaking in a dialect no one recognizes. At first, it's assumed to be a prank, or glossolalia, a speaking in tongues episode. But then they find an old tablet buried in clay beneath a collapsed monastery. On it is the same language. Not close, not similar, identical. The symbols match the linguist's spontaneous writing down to the curve of each letter. It gets weirder. In Tokyo, a computer science graduate runs a predictive algorithm using all known stanzas of the prophecy. She's trying to generate potential future versus purely academic. The AI generates one that doesn't exist in any known source until it's discovered later, scratched into the plaster wall of an abandoned French church, dated 1897. That's impossible, unless the prophecy isn't static. Unless it's recursive. You've probably seen that word before in math class, or coding recursive. Self-replicating, feeding back into itself, evolving. But what if that concept applies to prophecy? What if the text grows with time, reshaping itself like a tide, eroding rock? What if the more we try to decode it, the more it rewrites itself to remain ahead? Now the big institutions get involved. The Vatican releases an obscure statement referring to ancient texts misaligned with divine order. The wording is vague, but the timing too convenient. NASA publishes a short paper debunking connections between the prophecy and any known astronomical cycles. It's dry, technical, and totally ignored. Conspiracy forums rip it apart within hours. And then, in a sleepy corner of Wales, someone finds something that shifts everything. It's a bell, a small bronze artifact unearthed in a peat bog, pristine despite the centuries, carved into it, in the same language as the prophecy, are these words: "When this rings, memory will shatter." Naturally, the archaeologists dismiss it as a poetic trinket, a fun, spooky coincidence. That is, until it rings, not from impact, not from wind. It rings once clear, metallic, eerie, and half the wildlife in the surrounding forest migrates that same day. The bell is sealed in a lead container and shipped to a secure facility. Which facility, no one says. But a former employee leaks a surveillance photo. The bell is glowing faintly. Meanwhile, you're noticing dreams again. Not just one or two people now. Thousands. Hundreds of thousands across forums and social media describe the same night vision, a black staircase, endless and descending, with verses of the prophecy carved into each step. At the bottom is a door. No one opens it. You see the door, too. Once, in your dream, you almost touch the handle, but a whisper in your ear says, "Not yet." Quirky detail, sure, but unnerving. Absolutely. One afternoon, you meet someone in a bookstore. They ask about the prophecy, soft voice, neutral tone. They say, "It's not meant for everyone to understand, just enough to remember." Then they leave. But tucked into the book you were browsing is a slip of paper with 4 words. You will read it, creeped out naturally, but also curious. That phrase begins appearing elsewhere, scribbled on a cafe receipt, scrawled in permanent marker on a subway platform. stitched into a thrift store shirt in Milwaukee. You will read it. Is it a warning? A command? A fact? Then comes the media shutdown. A podcast known for discussing the prophecy is taken offline, its entire archive deleted. A documentary in production is suddenly, indefinitely postponed. Even a major publishing house pulls a book called Echoes of the Final Passage a week before release. Official reasons are murky content reevaluation, editorial concerns, sudden legal complications. Behind the scenes, you hear the same phrase whispered from different mouths. Something's coming, and maybe it is, because the final stanza, the one believed to be the missing verse, has started appearing again. But with a twist. Each time it shows up, it's slightly different. In silence, the echo will shatter, becomes in shadow. The silence shall burn, and then, in silence, the shadow will speak. Scholars don't know what to make of it. Are these mistranslations, variations, or something far more disturbing, an evolving text adjusting to the reader? That's when the symbol resurfaces. You know the one, the crest from the prophecy's last page. It's seen glowing faintly on a cave wall in Peru, burned into the bark of a dead oak in Ireland, inked onto the inside of a newborn's wrist in Jakarta. 3 continents, same week, not similar, identical. So, what do? You keep reading, of course. Because whether it's truth or myth, curse or code, the prophecy is no longer passive. It's folding into your world like a trick of the light, like a shadow that moves before you do. And now you have to wonder, are you interpreting it, or is it interpreting you? By now, you know there's no such thing as coincidence, not anymore. You're not just watching the prophecy unfold. You're part of it. It's threading itself into your surroundings with the quiet precision of a spider weaving in the dark. Every shadow, every echo, every oddly timed phrase begins to feel like a nudge. You start checking street names, glancing at the timestamp on your texts, waiting for the numbers to align with the cursed coordinates, or that recurring phrase, the silence will burn. And then it happens. A transmission. It's a strange day already. The weather shifts too quickly. A chill rolls in, despite the calendar swearing it's late spring. You're standing in a checkout line, maybe at a gas station, maybe a grocery store, and you hear it. A voice, low and static-ridden, comes through the intercom. Not the usual price check on aisle 5 kind of thing. It says, prepare the threshold. The seal thins, just once. No one else reacts, not even the cashier, who hands you your receipt without blinking. You ask, did you hear that they frown? Hear what the chills crawl up your spine like frost on glass. You rush home and search for news, any report of an audio anomaly, of electromagnetic interference, of a shortwave leak. Nothing, but late that night, a Reddit thread starts gaining traction. Dozens of people from all over the globe report hearing the same message at the same time. Some over the radio, others through their headphones, in the middle of songs. One girl says she heard it in the roar of her shower. It's not just a voice. It's a trigger. Because after the transmission, reports of physical phenomena spike. You read about shadows stretching in the wrong direction at noon, Birds flying in perfectly geometric spirals, then vanishing midair. People waking up with dirt under their fingernails, though they hadn't left bed. A historian in Vienna starts live streaming her breakdown. She claims the prophecy has reached its harmonic phase, a concept that sounds like pseudoscience until you realize she's quoting a fringe theorist from 1913 who disappeared without a trace after claiming to have mapped the breath print of the prophecy. Yeah, breath print. And her live stream cut after 11 minutes by an unexpected data fault. Only mirror recordings survive, uploaded by watchers, scattered like breadcrumbs. You're beginning to realize the prophecy isn't just being fulfilled. It's being amplified, and not just through words or symbols, through behavior, emotion, belief. That's when the dreams change. Remember the black staircase? You're on it again. But this time, you're not alone. Figures descend ahead of you, shadowed outlines, silent, moving with dreamlike grace. Their robes shimmer with unreadable script, glowing softly like moonlight reflected on oil. You try to see their faces, but your gaze slides off them like water off glass. At the bottom of the stairs, the door pulses with slow, ominous light. You reach for it. Your fingers graze the surface, and you wake up gasping, heart hammering, palms damp. Not fear, exactly. Not dread either. More like anticipation. Historians still argue whether prophetic phenomena influence the unconscious mind through suggestion, or whether the unconscious reaches out first, pulling prophecy into waking life like a tide dragging debris. Jung would have had a field day with this mess. But you just want to know what's on the other side of that door. And you're not alone. Across the world, groups begin to form. Not cults, not yet, but clusters of believers, skeptics, archivists, and truth seekers. Some wear pins with the crest. Others carry fragments of the prophecy printed on cloth, tattooed on skin, etched into pendants. You pass a woman on the street wearing a shirt that simply reads, "You are the 12th stanza." What does that mean? You don't know? Not yet? But you will. Somewhere in the shadows, the circle of the second dawn stirs. A post appears on a closed server titled Index Rising. No authorship, no metadata, just a series of coordinates. You plug them into a map, 3 locations. A ruined temple in western Turkey, a defunct Cold War listening station in Greenland, a sinkhole in rural Argentina. What links them? Archaeologists are baffled. Fringe theorists aren't. They claim those spots align with the tri-axis of emergence, a term pulled from a banned monograph published in 1971 by a monk-turned cartographer who vanished during an eclipse. Of course, people start flocking to these sites. Some go to observe, some to wait. Others to activate. A live stream from the Argentine sinkhole shows a group gathered at dawn. They chant something not in any known language, but it echoes the cadence of the prophecy's earliest passages. A wind rises. The audio crackles. And then the feed cuts. When it returns, 4 hours later, no one is there. Not a soul. No sign of struggle. No tracks, no campfire. Just the open earth and the eerie buzz of something missing. Of course, governments step in. Or try to. The Turkish ruins are sealed off. Greenland's base becomes military property. But it's too late. The story's already out, already alive. The prophecy is global now, viral, irrevocable, and you start noticing a change in your perception. Words look deeper. When you read certain stanzas again, they shimmer in your peripheral vision. You dream in languages you've never studied. One day, you speak aloud a line from the fourth fragment, and your dog tilts his head as if understanding. That same day, the mirrors in your house fog over for no reason. Quirky, yes. Concerning, also yes. Still, you keep digging. Because at the core of the prophecy is a question, one never fully asked, let alone answered. What is it preparing us for? A war, a rebirth, a convergence. You read a declassified file from the 1950s referencing prophetic alignment during solar flares. The attached drawing shows 3 intersecting rings, and in the center, a shape suspiciously like the prophecy's symbol. In the margins, threshold event estimated within 2 decades if sequence accelerates. That's 60 years ago. So, did it accelerate? You check the calendar. Your pulse skips. A rare celestial alignment is happening soon. Earth, Mars, and the moon in a straight line. The same alignment carved onto the bell. The same one mentioned in the dream stanza that appeared last month. When shadow aligns with blood and pearl, the gate yawns wide. You shut the book. The room suddenly feels colder. Your phone buzzes a notification from an anonymous number. It's time to find the 13th verse. The 13th verse? But there are only 12, aren't there? You sit still for a long moment. Phone still in hand. Screen glowing faintly in the darkness like it's daring you to breathe. The 13th verse. You scroll back up to the message. No sender, no metadata. No trace in your call log or messaging app. It shouldn't exist, and yet, here it is. Sitting in your notifications like a taunt from the prophecy itself. You mutter it under your breath, testing the words like they might bite. It's time to find the 13th verse. You weren't even sure there was a 13th verse. The ancient manuscript clearly ends with the 12th stanza, or so the scholars claimed. That's what made it feel poetic, cyclical. 12 signs, 12 lines, 12 symbols. The neatness of it was oddly comforting, even amidst the chaos. But now, something has broken the rhythm. And when the prophecy breaks rhythm, something else is always keeping time. So you begin your search again, not just for any verse, but for the verse, the hidden one, the suppressed one. You're not alone. Within hours of the message appearing, forums and dark net boards buzz like a kicked hive. People are posting screenshots of strange symbols, odd graffiti under bridges, new crop circles and spiral shapes that echo the final stanza's cadence. But none of them are the 13th verse. Not yet. You dig deeper. In an obscure library catalog from Prague, digitized only weeks ago, you find an archived file, previously mislabeled as a devotional poem. But as you read it aloud, something about its rhythm syncs too perfectly with the prophecy. Your skin tingles. The hairs on your arms stand up. It begins. When the tongue betrays the mirror, and the stars whisper home, the 13th will rise, unnamed, unbidden, unmade. No one knows who wrote it. The paper bears no date, no signature, just a sketch of the same crest seen in the prophecy, but inverted. The two-headed bird, once facing away from itself, now stares inward, beak to beak, as if devouring. You post a snippet anonymously. Within minutes, someone reposted under a new headline, the 13th verse discovered. You feel like a match thrown into dry grass. The whole world seems to catch flame with curiosity and dread. Suddenly, everything's moving faster. People in Venice and Tokyo begin chanting lines from this supposed verse on street corners. A group of monks in the Himalayas issues a rare joint statement claiming the verse matches an oral tradition never written down, passed from teacher to pupil for generations. They call it the unfolding voice. And then a scholar from Cairo reveals a lost page from a Geniza archive accidentally discovered behind a filing cabinet. On it, in faded Aramaic, beware the 13th. It is not of man, but made through man's forgetting. Historians still argue whether these fragments are part of the original prophecy or late-stage forgeries born from hysteria. But the verse has already taken root. You can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. It echoes now. It infects. You wake to find that the mirror in your bathroom fogged with symbols, not drawn by hand, no streaks, no fingerprints, just pure condensation, forming into ancient curves that fade before you can snap a photo. The symbols match those in the prog file. And in that moment, you know the verse is alive. But here's the twist. The 13th verse doesn't just add to the prophecy. It undoes it. It changes the entire meaning. Everything the prophecy built, it flips. The 12th stanza, once thought to be the final warning, now reads like a misdirection, a sleight of hand designed to distract from what's really coming. You start to wonder, what if the original authors buried the 13th verse on purpose? What if it was dangerous not because of what it revealed, but because of what it disrupted? That's when things get weirder. A linguist at MIT begins hearing a frequency in white noise, a kind of Morse code beneath static. She deciphers a sequence that matches the 13th verse syllable for syllable, but the signal only plays between 3:13 and 3:18 a.m. Local time, no matter the time zone, everywhere. Some theorists call this prophetic resonance the idea that prophecy isn't a document, but a waveform, a repeating hum in the background of reality, one we only tune into when we're just disoriented enough. Fringe, absolutely. And yet, why do you feel like the world is breathing heavier now? Birds migrate in reverse. Ant colonies abandon their hills. At night, skyscrapers flicker with light patterns that match the verse's metric rhythm. Long, short, long, pause. Someone finally runs an AI-generated overlay of these patterns across the globe, and it forms a map, not just any map. A spiral path that begins at the oldest known site of human worship, Göbekli Tepe, and spirals outward to 12 other known prophecy markers. The final point, a lake in northern Siberia, frozen year-round, uninhabited until now. Satellite images show a structure at the lake's center, just visible under the ice. Square, symmetrical, ancient, and radiating faint heat. No one built it. Or rather, no one alive remembers building it. A joint expedition is formed. Governments issue soft denials, but still send drones. Researchers, soldiers. You watch in real time as cameras descend through the ice and reveal a stone doorway, no hinges, no carvings, just a circle etched into its center, deep, perfect, unweathered, the symbol of the crest again. And at the bottom, a single inscription. Verse 13 begins, but the feed goes dark seconds later. In the coming days, global signals fluctuate. Planes reroute midair due to sensor errors. Tides shift half a meter off prediction. Dogs howl between 3:13 and 3:18 a.m. Even if sedated, pregnant women report identical dreams of a child made of light walking into fire. You can feel it. Something is waking, not just inside the prophecy, but in the people reading it. The 13th verse isn't just a warning. It's a key, and you're holding it now, but no one knows what it unlocks or what it binds shut. Yet, it starts with dreams. You don't even remember falling asleep. You're just suddenly there, standing barefoot in a foggy corridor that seems to stretch forever in both directions. The air thick with the scent of old paper and wet stone. You hear whispers, faint and rhythmic, like a choir practicing in reverse. Every word lurches backward in your skull, familiar and foreign at once. When you wake, your pillow is damp with sweat, and your heart is galloping like it's late for something. The 13th verse is doing something to your mind, and not just yours. A Reddit thread explodes overnight, thousands of people reporting eerily similar dreams: a hallway, flickering lights, a doorway at the end. Some see themselves walk through it, others never reach it, but all of them hear the same phrase before waking. It begins again. Again. You think back. Has it all happened before? Were there other prophecies that almost surfaced, but were buried before completion? One historian argues that fragments of the 13th verse match cryptic phrases found in the Sibylline books, ancient Roman oracles, that were deliberately destroyed or hidden by temple priests. Another insists the verse is a mirror of an Akkadian incantation used during eclipses, an incantation no one can fully translate. Historians still argue whether these are coincidences or evidence of a recurring pattern. But they all agree on one thing. The 13th verse isn't a simple continuation. It's a reset, and resets come with a cost. Governments begin acting strangely. Not openly panicked, no. They're much more careful than that. But you see the patterns if you look. Communications satellites reposition. Unusual seismic equipment gets moved to new coordinates many near ancient ruins. Travel to the Siberian site is now completely restricted, cordoned off under a vague environmental quarantine order. Meanwhile, the symbols of the 13th verse are popping up in places they shouldn't be, etched into glass in random hotel rooms, burned into wheat stalks. A full mural appears on the side of a building in Buenos Aires overnight, showing the double-headed crest turning to ash, with one word beneath, remember. But remember what you find yourself going back through old notebooks, childhood journals, even voice memos you never finished. You're looking for something, some trace that you've seen this verse before. That maybe, just maybe, this isn't your first encounter, and that's when you find it. A drawing, You made it when you were 9. On the back of a math worksheet. It's crude. Just pencil lines, but unmistakable. The same spiral map. The same crest. The same doorway. You stare at it, heart thudding. How could you have drawn this decades ago? You show it to your sister, and she turns pale. She remembers it. She even remembers you crying when you finished it and saying, "I didn't mean to. It just showed up in my hand." Goosebumps rise on your arms. You weren't chosen to find the 13th verse. You were made to remember it. You spend the next day in a fog, mind drifting in and out of memory, fact and fiction blending together like smoke. You keep whispering the verse under your breath just to keep it from echoing louder in your head. You try to work, eat, pretend to care about anything else. But your phone buzzes with a new notification. One word tonight, the message is sent from your own number. Now, let's just take a beat here. The logical part of your brain screams about data breaches and spoofing and psychological phenomena like the ideomotor effect. It begs you to log out, take a break, stop feeding the loop. But logic has no teeth when the verse hums inside your bones. You prepare for nightfall like it's a ritual. You turn off the lights, disconnect the router, power down everything. Just in case, just to be safe. Then, as the clock hits 3:13 a.m., and then your wall begins to glow. Not dramatically. No horror movie sparks or deep rumbles. Just a slow pulsing, like light moving through old paper. The outline of a door appears where no door has ever been, and you realize it's the same door from your dream. You don't touch it. You don't move. You just stare, heart trying to claw its way out of your chest. The light pulses a final time, and then fades, leaving nothing behind. You rush forward, touch the wall. Cold drywall. No seams, no trace. But when you look down, your feet are covered in dust. Fresh dust from where? You're not the only one. Reports flood in the next morning. Across the world, people see doors in their homes, offices, even in the middle of streets, and always during that same 5-minute window between 3:13 and 3:18. And then quiet. No more messages. No new verses. Just silence. Until someone in Iceland shares a photo from a glacier hike. The ice has melted to reveal an enormous disk, hundreds of feet wide. Embedded in it, impossibly preserved, is the same symbol from the 13th verse. But this one is cracked, split down the middle. Inside the crack, a staircase, descending. The research team goes silent 30 minutes after entering. No response. No recovery mission. Just silence. That's when you hear it again. Not in your phone. Not in your house. In your own breath. When you exhale, you whisper the first line of the 13th verse without meaning to. Like your lungs are reciting something they've always known. You stop and repeat it intentionally this time. But the line changes. Slightly. It's no longer the same phrase from before. You say it again, and it shifts again. Each breath is a new version. You're no longer reciting the verse. You're writing it. That's the truth, isn't it? The prophecy was never finished. Not because it was hidden or lost, but because it was waiting to be completed by the ones who remembered it best. People like you, But here's the thing. What if finishing it doesn't end the prophecy? What if it starts something else? A new pattern, a 13th era, or worse, a verse without end. You glance at the calendar. There's a circle around tonight's date. You didn't put it there, but the time beneath it. 3:13 a.m. Again, you stay awake that night. There's no pretending this time. No lazy, slipping into sleep as though the verse won't find you again. You've tried ignoring it, burying it, even doubting your sanity. But tonight, none of that matters. The verse doesn't ask for belief. It just is. You wrap yourself in a blanket and wait. Phone turned off. Lights dimmed. Heart pacing like it's already ahead of you. As the digital clock clicks to 3:13 a.m., your entire room sighs. That's the only way to describe it. A subtle pressure drop. Like your house just exhaled a secret it's been holding in for centuries. This time, there's no glowing door. Just darkness. But not the normal kind. This darkness feels awake, like it's staring back. You shift in your blanket, trying to reassure yourself that it's just your imagination, a trick of sleeplessness. And then you hear it. Tap, 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 you freeze. It's not the door, not the window. It's coming from inside the room. No. Inside your mind, a sound not heard with ears, but felt along the marrow of your bones. You know that sound. You've heard it before, a long time ago, back when you were little. And your grandmother told you about the knock that came before the storm. Back when you dreamt of staircases made of ice and rooms that shifted when you blinked. This tapping is not new. It's remembered. You speak aloud just to test your voice. Who's there? The tapping stops. The silence that follows feels loud. It pulses in your ears like a second heartbeat. And then, from nowhere, from everywhere, comes the voice. Not in English, not in words, even, but you understand it. Why did you stop writing? The question gut punches you, not because you don't know the answer, but because you do. You stopped out of fear, out of doubt, out of that nagging suspicion that the prophecy wasn't just a story, but a seed. And that every person who read the verse, who understood it, helped it grow. You didn't want to be a part of that. But now you realize it doesn't matter what you want. You were always part of it. Outside your window, the stars blink in strange patterns. Not twinkling signaling, a set of 3, then 5, then 13, again and again. The same pulse you saw carved into stone at the Siberian site, mirrored in the spiral drawing you made as a child. Patterns within patterns. It clicks. The verse isn't linear. It's recursive. Each reader adds to it. Every interpretation becomes part of its truth. That's why scholars could never agree on a single translation. It was never meant to be fixed. The prophecy evolves, and you, along with thousands of others who have come into contact with it, are now vessels for that evolution. So you do the only thing that feels natural. You write, not with a pen, not on paper, but with your breath, your thoughts, your dreams. You let the verse unfold in your mind like a flower blooming under midnight rain. Every word pulses behind your eyes, echoing in your teeth. A verse is a living thing. After all, you're not the only one doing this. across the globe, people wake at the same time, driven by the same invisible force. Some scribble on walls, others chant in forgotten dialects. One man in Prague hums a melody no one has heard in centuries, and an ancient carving nearby cracks open to reveal a chamber full of fossilized parchment, each marked with the spiral crest. It's as if the entire planet is syncing, harmonizing with the frequency of the 13th verse. That's when the anomalies begin. Clocks stop, then resume, but 5 seconds behind. Shadows no longer match their sources. A desert in Chile receives rainfall that smells like cinnamon and ink. A woman in Tunisia speaks in perfect Sumerian during her sleep. Though she's never studied a day of ancient history, historians scramble. Some try to debunk, others vanish. One professor leaves a final note before disappearing. The verse is not a prophecy. It's a virus, a chilling theory, but also incomplete. Because viruses destroy, this recreates. What if the verse isn't predicting something? What if it's rebooting reality? And then, the biggest shift of all, a team of astronomers studying a newly discovered comet, the same one whose trajectory matched a passage in the recovered verse, go live with a broadcast. They've run the math, they say, and it doesn't check out. The comet's path is impossible. It's weaving, like it's avoiding gravitational pulls, like it's following a line of verse. One of the astronomers breaks down midstream. His last words before the feed cuts. It's not a comet. It's a messenger. You don't sleep for the next 2 nights. You don't eat much either. The dreams become vivid again. Only now, you're not just observing. You're inside the verse, walking its lines like roads, reading symbols etched into the sky. Every now and then, you catch a glimpse of others doing the same. Sometimes you wave. Sometimes they wave back. Sometimes they don't look human. And always, always, the same question hums in the silence. Why did you stop writing? By now, the 13th verse has grown beyond language. It's not something you read. It's something you remember, like your ancestors sang it into the stones, like your blood hums its rhythm when you're alone. You start to notice things. A child in your building draws a perfect spiral on the sidewalk with chalk and then laughs like it's a joke, only she understands. The neighbor's dog barks in 3-beat intervals, matching the tapping sound from your room. Your coffee machine hisses steam that somehow sounds like the opening line of the verse. In reverse. The world isn't just participating in the verse. The world is the verse. But what happens when a verse finishes? A song ends. A prophecy fulfills. Or does it? You flip through old journals, dreams, snippets you've saved on napkins, all the phrases that have spilled out since this started. And that's when you see it, a pattern you didn't notice before. Every 5th word across your entries. It forms a message. Do not stop at the 13th. You count again. 1, 2, 3, 13. Then what you think back to the original scroll, the first one found in Siberia. The 13th verse was the last visible, but there was a blank space after it exactly wide enough for one more. A 14th verse, not missing, just unwritten, until now. You're not the only one who sees this. Forums light up again. Theories fly. People start drafting their own 14th verses poems, drawings, sounds. Each one is different. Each one feels right, because the verse doesn't need to agree. It only needs to continue. And so, you write yours, and as your hand finishes the final line, you feel the air shift again, just like that first night. The same hush, the same hum. Only now, it's not in your room. It's everywhere. The world exhales and waits. The waiting is the worst part. You've written your verse, or maybe it wrote you. You're not entirely sure anymore where you end and it begins. But now it's just quiet. Not a peaceful kind of quiet. No. This is the sharp-edged stillness before a world breaks open. Outside, birds chirp, even though it's 2:37 a.m. Not owls or crickets, actual birdsong. Like they're welcoming something or warning it. You flip back through your final words again. Do not stop at the 13th. You didn't. But what happens now? Across the globe, the same scene plays out. 1,000, maybe 1,000,000 people, all strangers, finalize their 14th verse. Some write on paper. Others speak it aloud to empty rooms. One woman tattoos hers down her arm in a trance. A monk in Bhutan carves his into a stone wall using nothing but his thumbnail. No two verses are identical, and yet they are, because each one ends the same way. We are the verse now. It doesn't make sense, and it makes perfect sense. Back in your room, you stand not because something tells you to, but because you're part of it. You understand now. This was never just about a prophecy, or even a story. The 13th verse wasn't a prediction. It was a primer. The real prophecy was you. People thought the verse foretold something external, a war, a celestial event, a resurrection. But the truth, the 13th verse was waiting for the right moment, the right people, the right resonance, a threshold. And now, the world has stepped over. Let me describe what happens next. Not because I think you'll believe it, but because somewhere inside, you already do. The air starts to shimmer, not just in your room, but over every city skyline, every desert dune, every polar plain. You don't see it with your eyes. You feel it, like the buzz in your skull before a migraine, or the tingle of déjà vu. Only this time, it doesn't go away. Somewhere in the Pacific, a dormant volcano hums a single note in C minor before falling silent again. In Cairo, the Sphinx's right paw glows faintly. In New York, every stoplight turns green for exactly 13 seconds at the same moment before flickering back. These are not coincidences. These are chords. The planet is tuning itself. Historians still argue whether the original verse was meant to cause this. Some believe it was a celestial blueprint passed down by a forgotten civilization, Atlanteans, Lemurians, even time-traveling humans. Others argue it's pure mass psychogenic illness, a worldwide madness born from social media and sleep deprivation. But those of you awake right now, you know better. You stand at your window. The stars above you are wrong, just slightly. That cluster wasn't there yesterday. And the moon looks closer, doesn't it? You blink and realize the stars are forming lines, sentences You can't read them with your eyes, but your bones hum with recognition. You know what they say. Verse 14 confirmed. You say it aloud without meaning to. It comes out like breath, like steam rising from tea. The earth does not tremble. The oceans don't rise. Nothing explodes. And yet, everything changes. A soft noise fills the air. Not music, not speech. Something in between. Like a lullaby, hummed by something older than language. You're not scared. For the first time since all this began, you feel oddly calm. Like everything's going according to plan. Like you've already done your part. That's when you see her. Outside, across the street. A girl in a yellow raincoat, hood up, arms at her sides, looking directly at you. You've never seen her before, but you know her. She lifts her hand, not in a wave, in a signal. 3 fingers up, then 5, then 13, the same pattern. Again and again. You blink, and she's gone. Back inside. The pages of your journal flip on their own. Back to the beginning. Your very first entry. It wasn't even about the verse. Just a random scribble you made after a weird dream years ago. But now, reading it again, you see it. You'd written the spiral. You'd written a version of the verse before you ever knew it existed. This thing didn't begin last week, or with that Siberian scroll. It began before memory, before language, passed down not through books, but through dreams, instincts, and accidents. You were always writing it. Every time you chose the weirder path, every time you stopped to listen to a thought that wasn't quite yours, every time you said, I don't know why, but this feels important. That was the verse, nudging you. And now it's fully awake. A global network of minds linked not by technology, but resonance. A sort of consciousness chorus. You and others like you become new stanzas, living lines in an unfolding poem. Somewhere in the Andes, an old stone doorway opens for the first time in 500 years. It reveals not gold or treasure, but a polished mirror. And etched into its frame, a line from the verse you wrote. Your line? In your handwriting. You're part of something bigger now. You are history's next chapter. And here's the wildest part. No one will believe any of it tomorrow. The media will report a strange weather anomaly or a coordinated online event. Most people will forget. The verse protects itself. It always has. It buries itself until it's needed again. And it leaves behind only traces, spirals, fragments, weird dreams. But you'll remember. Not every detail. Not perfectly. But enough. Enough to know you were part of the 13th verse. And helped write the 14th. So what comes next? Nothing. Or everything. Maybe a new verse. Maybe not in words this time. Maybe in sound or light or choices. And maybe, if someone wakes up 50 years from now with a strange dream and a verse they can't shake, they'll find your old notebook tucked in a drawer, dusty but intact. They'll read it and feel that familiar hum. And they'll know it's time for the 15th. You don't sleep that night. Not really. Not in the normal way. Instead, you lie down and stare at the ceiling, tracing invisible lines from corner to corner, wondering what it all meant. What you meant. You think about the stone mirror. The girl in the yellow raincoat, the scribbled verse you don't even remember writing. You think about how none of it adds up, and somehow all of it does. Sleep, when it finally comes, is soft and strange. No dreams, just warmth, like you've fallen into a deep, velvet pocket in time. Outside, the world forgets. You don't, not entirely. You keep a few things sensory fragments more than facts. The hum, the shimmer, the exact shape of the spiral that started it all. And in the weeks that follow, the world does what it always does with the unexplainable. It moves on. News channels cycle through other mysteries. That mass bird migration gone. The volcano in the Pacific declared a seismological glitch. Scientists argue. Conspiracy forums light up and die down. Scholars debate whether the so-called 13th verse even existed. Mass hallucination, they say. Group delusion. Internet echo chamber. You don't argue. Let them think what they want. Because every so often, you hear it in an escalator's gentle hum, in the exact rhythm of your feet on the pavement, in the pause between words when someone says, I feel like I've seen this before. There it is again. The verse, it's quieter now, submerged, but not gone. You find yourself writing more, not just word symbols, curves, notes that don't belong to any real musical scale. You doodle spirals in the corners of receipts. You hum things you've never heard before. At night. Sometimes you dream of cities built like stanzas. Streets that rhyme. Doors that only open when spoken to. You're not alone. Once, at a bus stop, you see someone else with the same spiral drawn on their wrist in ink. You make eye contact, say nothing, but you both smile. And it's enough. Somewhere far away, a child wakes up with a single word in her mouth, one her language doesn't have. She tells her mother, who brushes her hair and tells her to go back to sleep. But the word lingers. The verse is already waking again. It never sleeps long. And you go on with your life, but with your ears just a little more open, your eyes a little sharper, your heart like a tuning fork, always vibrating gently toward the next fragment, the next mystery, the next whisper in the dark. Because the prophecy wasn't buried. Not really. It just planted itself deeper, and now it grows through you. Now that our tale is told, it's time to wind things down. Slow the thoughts. Soften the edges. You've traveled far tonight? Across centuries and continents, through crumbling tombs and dusty libraries, into the heart of forgotten prophecies and living words. That's not nothing. Let it all fade for now. Not erased, just resting. Picture this. You're standing in a quiet forest. The kind that glows silver in the moonlight. The trees are tall, but not towering. They don't loom, they cradle. Somewhere behind you, a little brook babbles, tripping over smooth stones like it's giggling to itself. The ground is soft underfoot, mossy, safe. There's no rush here, no questions needing answers. The verse, the symbols, the girl in yellow, they're here. Yes, but gentler now. Like dreams you don't need to understand to feel. Take a breath, and another, longer, slower. Feel the quiet settle into your bones, The world keeps spinning. But for now, it's okay to step off and just float. You're safe. You're still. And somewhere, the next verse waits patiently for you to wake again. The story is over. See you tomorrow night. Sweet dreams.